Right, next little job on the agenda. Bought this little bandsaw, very second hand, very well used, but it still cuts and works okay. Wanted to do a little vertical bandsawing, a few bits of pipe I wanted to cut up, and I had a problem. The blade kept falling off, which turned out to be a little bit of excessive play in this top pulley there, where the bush is just shot right out of it. So we're going to replace that. Okay, so we've stripped it down. We've pressed our bush out of our pulley. We've taken our pin from our tracking block. This block moves up and down to track the blade onto the pulleys. This pin, this spigot, is really badly worn. It's got quite a notch in it there, so we're going to replace that. And the bush is very badly tapered, as you can see when it was on the pulley. Then it's quite badly tapered. So what I've got is a bit of car boot running around, swap meet stuff, a bit of phosphoronz. It's got 92 written on the end of it. Could be anything, but it's supposed to be a bushing phosphoronz. That's what the chap told me. And I've got a piece of 16mm stainless steel. This is a free machine in stainless steel. I don't know the number of it, but hopefully I've cut and used this before on another project, and that I was able to drill it and tap it. So that should make a nice pin. It should be a bit harder than this. What I'm going to do is the original spigot is 15mm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skim it down so that it fits into the block, but I'm going to leave it 16mm as it runs in the bush. We've got to make the bush, so we might as well make it fit that size rather than turn all this down. That's about it. This outside diameter of this is 22, and I think this is 20. This is 26, just under 26.5, 26.4 mil. So we're going to run that down in the lathe, bore it, ream it, so it's a nice tight fit on here. So the only other thing I'm going to do is it had UNC bolts in it, which I'm going to replace those with an equivalent size metric. Right, let's crack on. So we've finished in the lathe. We've parted this bush off, and then we've bored it almost to size, and then I've pressed it into the pulley. We then reamed it out so that it was a sliding fit to the shaft, with a little hand adjustable reamer. We then placed our adjusting block with our shaft on it back into the lathe and faced this edge so that it matched the angle, so it ran square with the shaft. Before, I think they'd used that little tube spacer because it would run on the crook, because they had an angle between the shaft and this block. So I faced that off. That's now square. We've made a new spacer up, just a piece of. It's actually an old motorcycle spacer, which I bored out, like a motorcycle wheel spacer, which I bored out and faced to length. So that fits nice and square onto that block. So now we can assemble. I think this is just, we need to lubricate it, but that's gone onto there. Drilled and tapped our shaft in the beginning, so our bolt goes in, we have a little bit of end play so we can get a little bit of lubrication in there and it runs freely. So now I'm going to assemble all this. And reset the tracking. So we've got our pulley assembly back into place, all tightened up, and the belt on and the blade on and adjusted, should I say. We've had to track this top pulley. This top pulley moves in and out on that little adjusting block at the back. There's an Allen key grub screw in the back and a lock nut. And I've just wound that. It says in the little guide that comes with a saw that the blade wants to sit to the back, so it wants to just ride just on the back lip, which I've done. We've now sorted out. That's that running now, and there's the mounting block. It allows it to slide up and down. There's a little bit of play in that, which gives us a little bit of sideways movement, but there is no movement now in the bush at all, so I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with that. I've let off the blade bearings, the guides for the blade. I let them off. I've let them back, moved them to the far back, and I've also slackened the nuts and moved the wheels so that they're not pinching the blade. The blade's free to turn at the moment, which we're now going to set that up. To try and get our blade to cut straight, because it did used to wander a little bit, but I think that was these bearings on here, they've never been changed and they're in a bit of a state, so I've taken them apart, cleaned them, put them back on, which should do us for today, and just see if it's going to work. If the saw turns out to be reasonable and it's going to do the jobs that I want it to do, then I'll replace the bearings and we'll go through. There's a little bit of play in the bottom pulley down there. In the bottom drive pulley there's a bearing behind here, and there's a little bit of play in that. It's a bit hard to tell with the tension on it. There is a little bit of play in that bearing, so we will have to replace that in the future. So let's see it run. Okay, turn it on. You can see it running. By doing that, we can just check our track, make sure we've tracked okay. We're just not trying to ride up on the lip at the back, and but it's deep on the pulley. Same with the bottom. It appears to be right hard up against the, well, it appears to be just missing the back, so the blade is fully engaged. So we'll set the guides. Well, to draw this to a conclusion, we've adjusted the rollers so that they just pinch the blade, hold it square. We've adjusted the back roller so that they're just touching the back of the blade. You can stop them with your finger when the blade's running. You can just lean and stop them with your finger so they're not pushing the blade forward. A little bit trickier than I thought. There's a little bit of play in everything. You've got a slot which you would assume was to hold just square, but it doesn't. So you end up, what I've done is I've lined both outside edges up to try and get them right. The guard, there's a little guard. It's probably one of the top ones been disposed of, but there's a little guard supposed to go cover the blade behind the guide. That doesn't allow you to get the section back far enough because it hits the front edge. So I had to take the guard off the bottom one, which I'll have to remake something for that if we're going to keep it. Now this blade is the blade that came with it. It's got a bit of stick on it. It feels relatively sharp, but I don't know how many cuts it's done. So we did a bit of work. We set the jaw up, and we did a horizontal cut on a piece of 2-inch box. We've marked the top, did a cut, set the square on it, and I could just see daylight underneath the square. So we're cutting very slightly on an angle. The blade's wandering us on an angle, so that we're cutting very slightly, but within a fraz, within, you know, a few thousandths. So I think that's going to do us for the time being. It's good enough. I predominantly want to use this as a vertical bandsaw if it works out. If it works out and it's good enough. I watched Welding Tricks and Tips. He made a stand for his pull to band bandsaw, and he uses that a lot, and it's basically what I want to try and do with this. I shall take it off of its base and make a pedestal for it, so I can use it as a vertical bandsaw only. In that way, I think for my purposes it would be a lot more useful. I have another saw to cut horizontally, so it's awkward to use as is vertically, so I think that's what I'm going to do. But we'll have a few trials, we'll have a few tests on things, we'll see how that goes. If it's going to work out for me, I'll put the time and effort into adapting it. If not, then I'll clean it up and probably sell it.